Hello everybody, this is Shirley Wiseman, also known as Aunt Sissy. Today we're going to be making something new. We're going to try some yellow squash bread, which is a variation of zucchini bread. So as you can see, we actually have the finished product here, which I've already experimented on. Haven't tried the taste, but we're going to taste it in just a minute. Also, I've got a headset now and a microphone, so hopefully y'all can hear me well. So that was the goal, so you can hear me well. Hopefully you can see me. I've got a tripod now for my phone, so we're trying to get high tech here with Aunt Sissy. So just want to show you my recipe I get from Betty Crocker, okay, which my original book is pretty old here. It's like from the 70s. This one's probably like a 90s version, but I found it at Goodwill for 99 cents, so that's awesome. Betty Crocker is kind of like Martha Stewart, although she was popular back in the 50s is when she came out. So I like her recipes. You're just tried and true classics. So anyway, we're going to get started. So what I'm going to do is double the recipe, and I've already done it before, and I made 2 big loaves and 4 small loaves, those being the small loaves. And doubling it works well. I've tried in the past. If you've seen in my videos, I have a zucchini bread, which I quadrupled, and this is a different recipe, which I actually use yellow squash instead of zucchini, but it turned out well. The other one's kind of caved in the middle, and these, I'll be right back here, have turned out really well. So they have not sunk down in the middle. So I'm going to go by this recipe, which you can use for either zucchini or for yellow squash. So so this is what I had. A bunch of yellow squash. So I said, I'm going to try to grate it like I would zucchini for zucchini bread. So I grated it in my food processor. So that's what it looks like. So you need 3 cups for one recipe, and we're going to double it. So I've got here 6 cups of shredded yellow squash. It might not be quite as watery as the zucchini, but it turned out really well. The texture, everything was good. So to start with, we have 3 cups, and we're doubling it, so we have 6 cups of grated zucchini. Then we're going to add our oil, which is let's see, I'm going to have to get my glasses on. 2/3 a cup of vegetable oil. So I just used a regular store brand. So when I doubled it, that was 1 1/3. Doubling 2/3 makes 4/3. So we put so first we have our squash, and then we add our oil. Okay, and then we're also going to add our eggs. There are 4 eggs per recipe, so I have 8 eggs, and I haven't whipped them yet. But when you get your eggs, they're best used at room temperature. And also large. You should use large and not the medium ones or the extra large. Most recipes for baking require just the large side. You can use brown eggs or white eggs, organic eggs, or whatever kind of eggs you want to use, but approximately a large size. Okay, so I've beat up my 8 eggs, which is 4 cups per recipe, and I'm adding that to my squash, my shredded yellow squash, which you could use zucchini if you like. It works either way. Okay, I've added that. So I've got the oil, the squash, okay, and the eggs in there. Now we're going to add the vanilla. And I use pure vanilla extract, okay? I don't like to use the artificial stuff. And I had my, hold on. I had my measuring spoons out, and then I forgot I washed them. These are my old ones. So it's 2 teaspoons per recipe, so I'm going to put 4 teaspoons. 1, 2, 3, 4. Also, I have my oven heating up to 350. Okay, it takes about an hour for the large loaves and about 40 minutes for the smaller loaves. Okay, so now I've got 2 teaspoons of vanilla, so I've doubled it, so I have 4 teaspoons. Okay, so I've got my squash, my eggs, my oil, my vanilla, and now we're going to add sugar. So it calls for 1 2/3 a cup sugar. Okay, and I just use regular sugar from the store. So doubling 1 2/3 is 3 1/3 cups. Okay, so we're going to stir that up in there. And trying to do this where you can see, since I've got it on a tripod. Okay, so, alright, so there we got the sugar added in there. Now, the next thing we're going to do, and I do this by hand. I just got a wooden spoon, a big bowl. I prefer to use this rather than a mixer. It really doesn't take that long to do it by hand anyway. So, and it's such a big mass. If you're doing them in bulk, it's easier to do it by hand. So our flour, and I use just all unbleached all-purpose flour. I don't use bleached, okay? And I don't use the pre-mixed with the baking powder and baking soda, whatever they put in it. I just use regular unbleached flour. So let's see, it calls for 3 cups of flour, so now I have 6 cups in here. Okay, and I'm going to add my spices. So it does, okay, so we got baking soda, baking powder. It called for 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And I just have a big thing of baking soda and I pour it into something small, so that's why I got it labeled. So 4 teaspoons of baking soda. So normally 2 for 1 recipe, so we're doubling it, so it's 4. Half a teaspoon of baking powder, so we're doubling it, so it's 1 teaspoon. Salt calls for 2 teaspoons. No, just a minute. Calls for 1 teaspoon of salt, but I'm doubling it, but instead of putting 2, I'm only putting 1. I usually put less salt. Okay, so I've got all that mixed in here. Just going to add that in. Okay. Spices, it calls for cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. I'm using 2 because we're doubling the recipe. Also cloves, ground cloves. And hopefully you can see these good in the camera. Okay, I like to get my cinnamon in a big thing. Half a teaspoon of cloves. So I'm doubling it, so it'll be 1 teaspoon. Okay, so I've got it pre-mixed up here. Just going to dump it in. Mix it up some, and then that'll be all the main ingredients, and then you can add nuts. And I've got some chopped pecans that I'm going to add, and it calls for raisins. I had some craisins, which I used in the first batch that I made, but I didn't have enough for the second batch. So, and I don't have any regular raisins. So we'll see how those turned out. I think it turned out pretty good. So you just mix your dry ingredients, and then you add in your nuts. So I've got, calls for a half a cup of nuts, and I use this chopper here. That's what I use to chop my nuts with. So these are pecans. Okay, so I've chopped them up in that chopper, and this is a cup of pecans. My other recipe, the one I just made, I did use some craisins. It called for raisins, and I had some, but I used them all. You can also use coconut if you don't have any nuts. You can use chocolate chips as well. So just put in a half a cup, like if you wanted to put coconut or chocolate chips, put in a half a cup per recipe. So in this one, I've got a whole cup of nuts because it called for half a cup of nuts. And I don't have any craisins in this one or raisins. So you just mix it all up. Make sure you get it all mixed good. And then we're going to pour it into our pans. And on my pans, I grease and flour. So when you grease them, I put a little bit of wax paper at the bottom of the bigger pans to make sure that they come out and they don't stick. The little pans, I just grease and flour. So on the bigger pans, when you grease the pan, then I put the wax paper at the bottom, and then I grease the wax paper, and then I flour it. So you just put a little bit of flour and you move it around in there so it coats the pan, and that will prevent it from sticking. Okay, so we're getting this pretty mixed up pretty well here. So about ready to get this into my pans. So my last one, I made 2 big pans and 4 small loaves. And when you're folding your ingredients, you just keep on stirring it. Make sure that it's all blended in and there's no flour. Okay, because otherwise flour will leave lumps. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So that's what it looks like here. So hopefully you can see that pretty good. Now, my recipe book. Okay. Now we've got pans. We've got 2 big pans, and I've got 4 little pans. I'm going to use them all. Okay. So we're just going to pour some. Now you don't want to put more than 2/3. And actually, as I'm stirring here, as I'm pouring, it's not quite stirred up a little bit in the bottom. Okay. Guess I can do this way so you can see. So just put in enough till it's about half of the pan. Just don't put more than 2/3 of the pan. Okay, now, and I'm left-handed, so I'm doing this with the wrong hand. Turn it around, and then put some in the little pans. I know I'm going backwards, sorry about that. It's easier for me to put it into the pans going this direction. And sometimes it makes a mess. Okay. So what I'm going to show you here is then you're going to put it in the oven once you've got them. And I like to arrange them when they're in the middle shelf. And I'll put them all on that one shelf so that they'll cook evenly. So I'm going to put them in the oven at 350 for 1 hour. And I know you're watching me put all this stuff in here. Let me move some pans out of the way so we'll have enough room to put all of our pans. You can put the pans on a tray if you like. It just makes them easier to work with. But in this case, I'm just going to put them all on the same shelf so there won't be enough room. I'm going to put it in just a minute here. Well, if you don't want to watch me finish, I'm almost done. So we'll just go ahead and finish it. These pans here are a little bit smaller than my other loaf pans. I have some small loaf pans, and then these are mini size, so they're a little bit smaller than the others. So you just put enough in there, and then whatever's left, I'm just going to stick it in the big pans, because it's not quite a half the amount here. So okay. All right. Now, I just like to clean my pans. I don't like to leave a lot of mess, so they'll get burnt on the edges. We don't want that. Make a mess. Okay. So now we're going to put it in the oven. And you might not be able to see me putting it in the oven. That's okay. I assure you they're going in. And I'm putting them all on the same shelf. You just need to arrange them so that they're not touching. Okay, so then again, it's at 350. And I'm going to have somebody sample my bread, because I actually don't eat gluten. I can't eat gluten. I am gluten intolerant. I actually have celiac, so I can't have dairy or eggs or gluten. But this is the finished product, so I wanted to see this. This has the yellow squash, and this one also, you can see it has a craisin in it, and it has pecans. And I have somebody here to taste it. So Richard, if you would please come over here and take a taste. So we're going to cut it. A couple of pieces here. I'll show it to the camera. So okay, I hold it up. Those are craisins, which are dried cranberries.
Oh, nice texture. It's
okay,
flat.
Look at the camera, Richard. Okay, it is very light and fluffy. It's not a heavy bread. And again, this is with yellow squash instead of zucchini. And so what's your opinion? You've been eating my zucchini bread. How does this compare to the zucchini bread, the yellow squash?
Similar, maybe. It seems lighter even.
Lighter well, this recipe is different. If you watched my other video on making zucchini bread in bulk, this recipe I use Betty Crocker. The other one, I don't even know where I got the recipe from. But I like this better. It has more eggs, so that will make it fluffier. So this recipe has 4 eggs. I think the other recipe was 2 eggs. That will make a difference. That will make it rise up and be fluffier, the more eggs. Okay, and we thank you for joining Aunt Sissy in baking yellow squash bread. And we'll catch you next time for something interesting again. Thank you.